As a child, in primary school or elementary school, depending on where you live, at some point or another your teacher probably gave you the traditional assignment of what do you want to be when you grow up. Some children might say a firefighter, a nurse, an astronaut, or maybe a superhero. But one that traditionally would come easily to many minds is filling the role of a police officer. This is the police allows the player to fulfill this particular power fantasy by taking on the role of an aging police chief, helping to restore law and order to a city riddled with crime and corruption. Basically, imagine yourself in-game as Commissioner Gordon from Batman, and you're forced to try and restore faith in the police by gradually stemming the flow of crime and corruption. Oh wait, they actually made a TV show about that. Huh, go figure. Anyway, This Is the Police takes the form of a top-down strategy and resource management game, which also incorporates mechanics from traditional card-based role-playing games. You start the game initially with a very limited amount of on-staff personnel and department resources, although depending on the choices you make, the game will either grant you increased staffing and resources, or will penalize you by reducing your department's funding, forcing you to lay off one or more of your employees, or make other necessary cutbacks. You'll start the day at 7 AM, and depending on your current progress within the game may start the day by presenting you with an interactive cutscene, meant to develop your character Jack, and also introduce new characters, locations, and gameplay mechanic concepts, all of which may have an effect on you, the player. The problem is these cutscenes, with some exceptions, are very tedious, and can go on for several minutes at a time. I generally consider myself to be a fairly patient person, but even I was rapidly clicking on the on-screen button to skip particular lines of dialogue, just to keep things moving at a decent pace. I would watch the full cutscenes, just to ensure I don't miss anything vital, but even with me skipping over many if not all of the character lines, the cutscenes generally continue to feel inconsequential. But why is that? The voice acting for Jack, the protagonist, was fairly generic to be sure, but there was nothing in the writing or delivery of the dialogue that really seemed out of place or lacking in quality. It wasn't until much later that I realized the source of my agitation. Jack just isn't a likable character. There is no point in the game that made me as a player really root for him or feel anything resembling concern for him as a character. In attempting to create the ultimate no-nonsense one-man-against-the-world aging hero badass, what the developers ended up delivering was an irritable, irascible old man, with a personality so abrasive and a code of ethics so twisted that on more than one occasion I start to question whether we, and not the Mafia, were actually the good guys. And not in a deep, introspective Watchmen or Dark Knight anti-hero way. No, I simply mean wondering whether my character can be considered a villain, just simply based on how utterly dislikable he is. If it feels like I'm beating a dead horse here, I'm sorry, but the developers were the ones so intent on making Jack here into such a dislikable, ignoble, callous person. Okay, now that I've ranted enough about Jack, I would like to turn your attention towards the actual gameplay. As I mentioned at the start of this video, the vast majority of the actual gameplay takes place from a traditional top-down perspective, where you, the player, respond to emergency 911 calls relayed to you by dispatch. These will be represented on the map as icons, which when clicked on will expand into a full pop-up window, giving you a full description on the situation and allowing you to decide who you want to send out to answer the call. And no, it's not going to be the Ghostbusters. They're off destroying their own franchise right now. In addition to your normal police officer roster, you can over time unlock the ability to call in SWAT troops and other reinforcements on a once-a-day cooldown basis. Different situations will require different responses. During a state of calm, where crime is generally less frequent, the crimes themselves are smaller offenses, and there is no imminent danger to your officers, you can elect to send individual officers on their own for some assignments, particularly in the case of non-violent crimes. But if your city is currently experiencing civil unrest, such as when a particular group of violent protesters or a vigilante group has threatened to, or has started to, attack your police officers, your remaining police officers will start to refuse to leave the station without sufficient backup. Cases that would normally require 2 officers may now require 4 or 5, depending on how dire the situation is in the eyes of your officers. This quickly becomes a major management problem, as at one point during my playthrough I lost 4 of my officers in a bizarre twist. After the 4 of them, 2 of them being experienced veterans, all died in a firefight against one single criminal with a pistol. Yes, I lost all 4 of my highly trained officers to one dude with a pistol. Kinda makes you think whether or not those guys were actually as good as the game thinks they were. kinda doesn't say a lot about the skill of my guys. I guess you sometimes just get a bad roll of the dice, but either way that was really weird. In any case, this left me with a handful of surviving officers, all of whom were too traumatized to leave the building, in groups of less than 4. The numbering of which was a bit ironic considering that it was a squad of 4 that all died to one lone gunman in the first place. I guess the remaining officers were just hoping to get it all over with and repeat history. Now the question is, when you, like me, find yourself suddenly lacking half of your normal officers on shift, the question becomes what do you do? Your first response would be to check on the job market for qualified officers who meet your criteria. Do you want experienced officers with high efficiency scores? Go for it. Want to go about fulfilling a arbitrary diversity hiring criteria to please City Hall in the hopes of having future department requests approved without trouble? You can do that too. You can even decide what shift you want the hired person to work on. You have 2 teams under your control, an A team and a B team, with both teams alternating at regular intervals. Should one of your teams be short a member or 2, you can always transfer one of your officers from one team to the other at any time. However, just like bringing on a new officer, this will take 1 in-game day to take effect. In addition to your normal crew of officers, you also have a select number of detectives, who can be assigned to work on specific specialty cases where uncovering information is key. Consider them to be similar in functionality to most espionage units in other strategy games. Detectives cannot openly engage in combat, but can help you hunt down and arrest prominent criminals that would normally be above the figurative pay grade of your normal officers, such as taking down mafia lieutenants and other underbosses. Detectives will provide you photographs and witness testimonies from different crime scenes, and it's up to you to put the pieces together in order to form a cohesive timeline of events, after which point your detectives will go out and safely apprehend the culprit involved. In addition to your normal police responsibilities, you also have to balance your department's works of heroism and selflessness alongside the needs and well-being of the Mafia, who early on into the campaign sink their claws into you, forcing you into a mutually beneficial relationship. In the case of most everyday criminal situations, the Mafia have no problem with you appearing to do your job and taking care of the individual situations. But every now and then you'll get a message from the Mafia boss telling you not to respond to a specific 911 emergency call that will occur during a specific time of day. Choose to appease him at every opportunity, and City Hall will punish you for your inactivity. But choose to ignore the warning and send your officers in to respond to the call, and you'll begin to get increasingly violent warnings from the Mafia to back off. This results in the player effectively having to constantly perform a balancing act, alternating between appeasing the City Hall and appeasing the Mafia. After the game finishes teaching you the basic mechanics during the initial hour or 2 of play, it promptly throws you right into the middle of a turf war between 2 rival syndicates, giving you, the player, the choice over which faction you prefer to align yourself with. This really doubles down on one of the leading thematic elements in the game, the whole concept of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, forcing you to question whether you've really gotten to bed with the right opposition, or whether you created an even bigger danger in its place. You, the player, can have a considerable impact on the success or failure of your given side by deciding to send your police officers in on optional assignments your chosen Mafia will give you. Some of these are fairly mundane assignments, such as providing police protection for the daughter of a Mafia lieutenant on the day of her wedding, as the mob is worried about the potential violent retaliation from the opposing side. While it's possible no direct danger is at play in cases like this, completion of these quests will improve the morale of your given side, increasing the likelihood of them being able to emerge victorious over the other mob at the end of the day. At the conclusion of every workday, you'll be presented with a screen showing which Mafia side is in the lead at that time, represented on screen by a total of points. By consistently outperforming the opposing faction's point total, your chosen Mafia will gradually drive them out of the city and eventually hold exclusive dominance over the city's crime. This will benefit you as the head of police, as the degree of violent gang-related crime will drop considerably, returning your attention to the more normal, smaller-scale crime. This also has the added benefit of getting City Hall off your back to some degree, as a failure to address any violent crime or losing your officers in a case gone wrong can result in heavy penalties and potentially drive you closer to being fired. A ultimate game over. The gameplay design choice of combining moral dilemmas with a set of equally contrasting benefits and drawbacks is in nature eerily similar to games like Papers, Please, although the implementation is slightly different here. But sadly, this mechanic takes a bit of a backseat later into the campaign at the conclusion of the Mafia feud, and from this point on, the game returns to its much more mundane roots, which in my opinion aren't enough to carry the game. My final score for This Is the Police is an 8 out of 10. For all my criticisms of its protagonist and specific gameplay limitations, This Is the Police does overall manage to do a decent job of balancing top-down strategy with traditional card-based RPG mechanics. It just suffers on many levels from being a bit too superficial and thus, for some, may run the risk of appearing redundant and ultimately uninteresting once you get past the first hour or two of the game. It's a game that I would definitely recommend picking up during a Steam sale if you want to sit back and experience some enjoyable but mind-numbing gameplay. This Is the Police is to gaming what a Michael Bay movie is to the film industry. You'll walk away either loving or hating it, before it quickly fades from your memory altogether. But that's it for this What Is the Point Of. Hope you've enjoyed this newest episode. If you did, please do hit subscribe as it does really help out the channel, and if you have already, please do hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, and tell me in the comments below what you think of This Is the Police, and tell me what you'd like me to review next. Any game recommendations would be greatly appreciated. This is WarriorDan signing out. Stay awesome everybody, and peace out.